From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Night Show. I'm going to join Nolan as guest this week, sports reporter and anchor Kate Rogerson to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the show. And joining me this week is a very special guest. Both share the bond and the blood that pulses Raliegh blue through and through till the day we're dead, as the saying goes. She now can be found down in the North Carolina Chapel Hill area reporting on the sports of today and the athletes of today. It is a true honor to have Kate Rogerson on the show today. Kate, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Just another day of paradise. Rhodey basketball just started yesterday, although going 0-2, but expected early on with the new arrivals of certain new coaches. But what can you say?
Yeah, I think, we all want that first game of the season to be perfect, but let's face it, it's not. It's only yesterday was November 7th, so it's a long season. It's a long way to go to get to February to March, but I'm really happy to have college basketball back. It's my favorite sport. So good things hopefully to come for Rhodey this season.
Well, one of the reporters for Projo had said that Dan Hurley's first season opener game at URI, he lost as well. I forget who it was, Norfolk State or wherever it was. So we'll see if there's a replication of the progress that they have. Although there are many things which I'll get into that I like better than last year's squad, which is a depression case in itself. But on to bigger and better things. I sort of want to start off like this, and you're a prime example of this, being that you are in the job market, found a job, found two jobs, and then graduated during the last 3 years of craziness, lost out on practically your entirety of your senior year. So now 3 years into with it sort of quote unquote in the back view mirror, what's it been like now compared to what it was?
I think the biggest adjustment for me when I graduated in 2020 was, that fear that a lot of people had was like, oh my gosh, am I going to get a job as a senior? Because not only were sports on pause, but in the world of media, a lot of people stopped hiring. There were freezes, people were extending their contracts. So I was fortunate that I landed in Eugene, Oregon and got that job. In the beginning, it was really challenging because everything was on Zoom. It was middle pandemic. So meeting people was not easy. Trying to establish relationships and create connections, it took a lot of work. But, with time, life has sort of gotten normal. I had a blast covering the Ducks and the Beavers and everything Western Oregon had. People always ask me, how did you move 3,000 miles from home when you didn't know a single person? And it was the people that I worked with, the student athletes I got to cover, the people in the community. Eugene is a home away from home for me, kind of like how when you go to college and you step on campus your freshman year, you're like, am I really going to be here for 4 years type of thing? And it goes by in the blink of your eye. So, where Kingston and Narragansett are a home away from home, Eugene's the same thing for me. And then over the course this past summer, my contract was ending and I had the opportunity to stay in Oregon if I wanted to, but I felt like it was time. Not only did I kind of want to get a little bit closer to home on the East Coast, but I feel like I needed to grow more. I needed to be challenged more. And loving college basketball, when an opportunity came up in the Durham, Raleigh, Chapel Hill area, I was like, that's where Duke is. That's where UNC is. That's where NC State is. There's a whole trifecta of colleges here. So went through the interview process and, things worked out. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I couldn't be more happier to be here. A little bit different than when I entered the job market 3 years ago, because things are actually finally getting back to normal. We're allowed to go in the locker rooms. I'm actually getting to sit on press row and shake people's hands. We don't have to wear masks and see people's faces. So the past 3 years have been not easy for anyone, I don't think. But, like I said, everything happens for a reason, and it's all part of the plan in some shape or form, whether you believe it or not. So I'm super pumped to be here in North Carolina, closer to home, and just covering great stuff in a great sports market.
Well, nothing against the Oregon Ducks or the Beavers or any of that stuff, but to go from that to then covering Duke and UNC, NC State in college basketball specifically, that's I'm sure a huge step up, but also brings on a whole nother level of nerves that bigger than what you had in Oregon. I always like asking this question. This is sort of a question I admired the most. What's one thing that Kate's learned about herself over the last 3 years that she didn't know about herself prior?
I think it's just simple, that if you put your mind to something, if you want to achieve something, is that you can do it. There was a saying when I used to play soccer growing up that I always tell myself is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And I think if you just grind, if you just put your head down and work, and you tell yourself that this is temporary, you know, because there's moments and feelings where like I said, when you're a freshman in college, when you start your new job, oh my gosh, I'm going to be here for 2, 3, 4 years. Can I do this? I think a lot of it is about mindset. And there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be days where you're crying, there's going to be days where you're so happy, having pinch me moments, but it's all a part of the process. So I think if you just work hard, it should get you to where you need to go.
Sure.
Now I'm only 24, almost 25 years old. So I have a long way to go in business and life and everything. But I think that's kind of carried me a lot through my journey, whether, like I said, it was as a student athlete when I was in high school, in college, in this business. I think just hard work will get you really, really far in life.
Growing up in southern New England of Massachusetts and as an athlete up until high school, besides that, the first notion or a mindset or idea of pursuing sports, not athletically, if that wasn't going to work out, but in sports media department, was there ever an idea popping into your head when you were in high school?
I don't really know. People, you know, I feel like a lot of people who want to be sports broadcasters, they recognize it when they're, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old. They're like, I want to do that. Now, there was a moment of that for me. My dad always tells people the story of when I was 3 years old and he came home from work and I was sitting on the couch watching the NFL draft. And I had the Boston Globe out in front of me and they have the mock drafts. And I made my dad sit with me until the Patriots picked. And I believe they were in the 20s. They were not early on. And the NFL draft, as we know, takes a long time. So I made him sit with me for like 2 hours. And when the Patriots didn't pick the person listed in the paper as a mock draft, I was like distraught and so confused. I'm like, but it said this, Dad. Like, what the heck? So he had to explain to me. And, you know, a big portion of my love for sports, the interest in sports, comes from my relationship with my dad. I have 2 older sisters. We're all very different. And my dad says I'm the son he never had, just because I'm a total tomboy. I love sports, compared to, you know, my sister who's a dancer, more girly, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And then, so I just always have loved sports, always watching them, you know, the stats, the facts, the players, their background. And I don't know, it just kind of fascinated me. And I always loved history and English, math and science, not my thing. So when I kind of got into high school, I just feel like I was taking more writing classes and speaking classes. And I knew I wanted to do journalism and I knew I loved sports, but I didn't know what capacity that would be. So when I was a freshman at Rhode Island, I did a little bit of everything. And I always tell people that student media, I'm sure you can vouch for this, is the best thing ever, because you can do the radio, you can do the paper, you can do TV. If you dabble a little bit of everything, hopefully that can guide you in the direction you need to go in. So I would say a lot of my, you know, sports media, sports broadcasting journey started in college. There were ideas of it in high school. I was like, oh, I think I want to do that. Come to fruition and actually start happening until college. And like I said, I just kind of tried everything. I did the on-camera part. I'm like, oh, this is fun. And doing it, had the internships, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it. So here we are. And is it a very unique journey? For sure. I don't have a normal life whatsoever, but I love every second of it.
Well, sure. Hopefully you want that, or else you probably say to yourself, why am I in this career that I shouldn't be in? Speaking of you, Ryan, saying that, you know, growing up in New England, of course, the beautiful weather we have in the late winter, early spring that we have in Rhode Island. Besides that, though, because of course that's the number one decision people choose to go to school in Rhode Island. What was it about that school that you had previously known about in terms of sports media, but also of your own interest?
Yeah. So I was set on going big and far in high school, because a lot of people in Massachusetts, and I think New England as a whole, a lot of people will go to state schools. And there's nothing wrong with state schools, because we're fortunate that our education system back home is fantastic. But I was set on going big and far because of the connection to sports. I wanted to go to a school that had phenomenal football and basketball and everybody's at the games. So I applied to Michigan State, Maryland, Colorado. I was like dead set on. But then, you know, life hits and it's like, do I really want to go to school hours and hours away? Do I really want to pay a lot of money and be in debt? There was a lot of factors
Yeah.
into it. So I chose Rhode Island because I felt like their journalism program offered me opportunities to start right away. Because, for example, at Michigan State, they had a whole sports journalism major before Rhode Island established
Yeah.
theirs. And that was a really, really attractive thing to me. But when I sat down and looked at the curriculum, it was all 300, 400 level classes. So I wasn't able to do any sports journalism until I was a junior or senior. And I was like, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
Compared to at Rhody, you're a freshman. They're like, oh, yeah, you can like sit press row at a women's basketball game. And I was like, oh, okay, I want to do that. So it was a whole combination of things, distance from home, money, personal fit. But when it came to the academic standpoint, I just loved how you could dive in right away.
Sure.
I loved that I could be a journalism major, but take a film class, but take a PR class, but, kind of get a taste, a little bit of everything. And I think that's what makes URI so special is you can kind of do anything you want within an academic standpoint,
Sure,
of course, but whether it's extracurricular activity, whether it's a certain class or a course or getting to work on a certain project. Rhode Island was so great for that. It's the perfect size where it's big enough, but not too big. And I know the Harrington School has really grown, but I loved that, the journalism program is really tight knit and everyone, your professors. So love Rhody. I'd do it all again if I could.
Maybe you had this mindset, maybe you didn't. You might have thought, oh, hey, yeah, I'm covering these big stories right away, covering the big teams, football, and we covering these games and that. But like anything else, you have to start, I'm sure, from the small teams and the smaller stuff starting out. Going that path and having to start from the beginning, how did you handle that compared to maybe what your expectations were?
Yeah, I think, again, going back to the hard work part, it's important to remember that, I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this. Like, not every day is going to be perfect. Like when you look at people on TV and, if they're on the sidelines of, Alabama, Tennessee, or the Patriots versus the Jets or something, like everybody starts somewhere. And in my internships and talking to people, they made it really important to me. They really emphasized the value of knowing kind of every single step of the job. And that's just not the on-camera talking part. That's the fun part for all of us. That's why we get into it. But the behind the scenes, the technical, the audio, the camera. There's just so much that goes into it that people who aren't in this business don't recognize. But I think I realized that I was like, okay, I have to earn my stripes. I have to prove to people that I'm serious about this and that I want to do this. So not being able to cover the men's basketball team, who my freshman and sophomore year were NCAA tournament teams. So that's where everybody was. Everyone wanted to go there. I was more than happy to go to women's basketball, who was not fantastic my first years at school, to go to softball, who was a struggling team, to cover women's soccer, who didn't win a game. And, just because those teams aren't successful doesn't mean they don't deserve coverage. It doesn't mean that they, shouldn't be talked about. It's just the high revenue sports, just the way it is. It's just the way of life. The high revenue sports and the basketball and the football and baseball, those get the eye. So everybody wants to cover those. But working on those smaller scale sports that don't get as much attention showed me not only how to cover it and how to be a reporter, but I got to develop great relationships. Tammy Reese, I love Tammy Reese. She is amazing, that she's turned that program around. But when I was a senior, I still covered women's basketball, but Nick Cardy and I were like the only two people there every game. And, we really got to cultivate those relationships and get to know people. And it just all comes together in a way. I think just the biggest thing is going back to the mindset. It's like everybody deserves their roses, but you got to earn those roses, if that makes sense.
No, sure. But I'm sure there has to be a sense of pride in, saying, yeah, you're damn right. My work's quality when, Shane and Jody and those people give you the stories of the women's basketball team or the men's basketball team. And it sort of shows that, oh, these people are recognizing my work and now I have quality product to release. You talked about your internship experiences, not just, whether it be at local stations here in Rhode Island or in Mass or with ESPN. You have experience shooting at URI, even though it's just the college stuff. And then you're editing and writing and all this, producing your own stuff. How much of those experiences with maybe Shane and Jody and then doing it on yourself helped you ease into the internship version of it with stations like ABC6 and so forth?
Yeah, I think it was honestly a whole combination of everything. I think the fact that, URI athletics is so welcoming and open to student media is, it's everything. 'Cause I know that's not always the case at some universities, or,
Sure.
you might be limited opportunities, but, having that grasp and that standpoint of, testing the waters and learning things is what got me, my experiences as a sophomore doing things, doing the newscast, learning how to shoot highlights and do everything helped me land the internship at ABC6 because, Nick and Ian were like, oh, she has experience. She knows what she's doing. Like, she should be a good fit here. And then that only, skyrocketed from there because then I was doing more with them. So then I was doubling down. I was doing student media, I was doing class, and I was, shooting and editing and learning how TV worked with ABC6. And I owe everything to Nick and Ian because that was really my first real world experience. They brought me into the Patriots locker room. I got to go to Gillette Stadium. I was on the sideline to the World Series. I was at high school football. I did everything with them. And, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And they were so supportive of me and, would give me all this advice. I still talk to them. I still catch up with them and give them updates and ask how they're doing. So I just think the opportunity, you have to be ambitious. You have to be hungry because this job is not easy. There's a lot of people who want to do it. And going back to what I was saying with hard work, it's like if you work hard, if you, kind of follow a blueprint and just grind and take advantage of everything, things should hopefully work out in your favor.
Sure.
You should be able to grow and prosper on your own because, like anything, the more you do something, the more comfortable you get. And eventually, you'll see your growth, whether that's on camera, behind the mic, or writing on paper. It's all about reps, and the reps that I got as a student, and then the reps that I got, in my internships just set me up for real life.
Doing stuff for URI and student broadcast is one thing. Then working at a station like ABC6 or in Massachusetts is another thing. But then working for ESPN is a whole nother chasm in of itself. Compared to maybe URI and creating your own highlight reels and that sort of stuff and cutting clips and stuff. To then internships, what was that process like for ESPN? Because I'm sure you have people there watching over you and saying, "Oh yeah, this is what we want." But how did you, go about that seeing as sort of you're on your own and you don't have someone like Shane who's there, with you every step of the way?
Yeah. Interning at ESPN is one of those things that I still look back and I'm like, I did that, because it was it was craziness. It was my senior year. Well, to backtrack, I always would apply for, the big time network internships. I would just throw my resume in and I was like, I'll never get a call back. But then, I got an email. It's like, oh, we'd like to interview you for a phone call. Great, whatever. I do it. I go through like 3 interviews and it got offered to me. And I was like, is this real life, And immediately I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I can't do this. They need me to live in Bristol. I live in Narragansett. I go to school. I have a job. I'm like, I have a whole life here. Like, what do you mean? So I pretty much just said, okay, full send. I'm going to do it. Like, you don't say no to ESPN.
Sure.
So I changed my enrollment status. I went from being full-time to part-time, and I was ahead on credits. So I could have graduated early, but my parents like, no, just do the whole 4, whatever. So, I changed my enrollment. I was taking online classes through different universities to get the credits for URI. And it was a little bit of a logistical fiasco, but it all worked out. So then I was living in Bristol. They put you up in a hotel when you're an intern at ESPN. So I lived in a hotel. I would go to work around like 2 and I'd get home maybe at 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, it would depend on the day. And then I would do my online classes, and it was just a cycle every day of, okay, go to work at ESPN, do my online classes, go to work at ESPN, drive back to Rhodey, work a basketball game, go back. Like, I don't know how I did it, but I did.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those experiences where it just showed you like, okay, this is how you create TV.
Sure.
This is ESPN. This is how they do things. These are all the people that work behind the scenes, because we just watch Sports Center and we're like, oh, yeah. There are hundreds of people that contribute to that show. Hundreds. How you create a highlight and, tell a story in 2 minutes is way more complex looking at it, it becomes second nature, but
Sure.
just, focusing on one player, finding the stats, reaching out to someone, having someone create a special graphic. It is just the creativity at ESPN is out of this world.
Sure.
And it was extremely motivating and extremely eye-opening, but also very intimidating.
Sure.
And I don't say that to be negative, but as you mentioned, people are watching over you. There are high expectations. It is high pressure. You are expected to be near perfect every single time. They don't like mistakes. They don't like mess ups. And it was a lot, it was a little nerve-wracking and anxious when I was trying to learn the ropes and how to do things, because people that work there have been there for years. They're
Sure.
very good at their job for a reason. People tune in and watch SportsCenter and do those things. So that was really eye-opening to me, because it was kind of like, okay, this is real life. Like, this isn't like URI student media where if you mess up, doesn't matter, no one's watching. Like, there are people watching. And at the same time, though, you got to have fun with it.
Yeah.
There were some days where I was like, do I really want to do this? Because
Sure.
part of the reason why I went to ESPN was because I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue a job on camera. I was kind of had a like midlife crisis senior year, and I was like, do I want to move away? Oh my gosh, do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? And going to ESPN really helped me identify my career goals, because I was like, I don't want to sit behind a computer and log games and create a highlight and write scripts. And that's fine. I still do that at my job now, but I was like, I don't want to do that every day. I want to be in the action. I want to be at games. I want to be telling stories. I want to be out in the community. So it's a whole accumulation of everything. And the people who still work at ESPN, I mean, they're still journalists. They just aren't on camera. They're telling different stories in a different manner, or actually the people that work at SportsCenter. So it was I feel like it was kind of like a wake up call to me, and it was a great prep to go on to the real world when you're on your own, if that makes sense.
Sure. Going from URI basketball and football, no offense to those programs, they've had success, of course, but going from that to then adjusting to West Coast, especially Oregon football and basketball, how much of a transition was that for you? Not just in terms of being able to do it from the get-go, but also realizing what type of programs you were covering.
Yeah. Well, the Pac-12 is a very interesting conference. Will they survive this expansion thing? I have no idea. But I think football was the biggest change for me. Is I only covered URI football for my senior year, really only followed it really closely my senior year. And other than that, I always tell people, the Northeast, New England specifically, is just pro sports dominated.
Yeah.
Not that people don't care about college sports, they do, but from a broader media standpoint and, what's broadcasted on TV, especially growing up outside of Boston, is just, Patriots, Red Sox, Celtics, Bruins. Yeah. Colleges don't really get a shout out unless, it's a crazy play or it's hockey, in a championship or the Bean Pot or something. So adjusting to, I'd say, the landscape of a Power 5 college sport was a big shift for me, because people are so devoted and people care so much and they're following it like crazy. And then another element to that is, when I first got there in 2020, the Pac-12 had postponed their season for like 3 months. So I didn't actually cover a football game until like the first. So people were even more in tune with what was happening because of, regulations, games, people opting in, opting out, and no one could go to anything. So that period of time when I first got to Eugene was so valuable for me as a sports journalist, because people cared and they were tuning in because they couldn't see it with their own eyes. So my first year was really interesting because of that, because going back to earlier, where everything was on Zoom and it wasn't on person, creating connections and getting to see things was not easy. So I had to do a lot of research, and I spent a lot of time, outside of work, like just watching games and reading notes and recapping things to try and get a gist of, okay, what am I even covering? So my second year in Eugene had a way better understanding, and just getting to, sit at preseason training, fall camp, as we call it, for the Ducks and Beavers, just getting to like watch the players and watch the game, a visual learner. So just like, I would say that was the biggest thing,
Sure.
is just kind of getting a grasp for the environment and how much it meant. Because you can't get in your head about knowing sport. It's like,
Sure.
we've all been watching these sports forever. College
Sure.
basketball, I've been watching forever. College football, regular football, you've been watching forever. It's just covering it in a different capacity,
Sure.
if that makes sense, of just, you know, digesting the information, asking questions about, you know, certain things, whether it's a player, schematic, or relationship. I'm really big on the relationship standpoint and, you know, the chemistry of teams, because let's be real, if your team chemistry is not good, those X's and O's don't mean shit. You are
Yeah.
going to lose. You are not going to play well, like things of that nature. So I would say it was just, you know, the higher scale of value and the audience caring and paying attention and, you know, being held accountable, because when you are in these bigger environments, there's more people, there's a bigger media core. You know, how can you not only fit in with this group and maintain your credibility so people trust you and know that you're talking about, but also, like, how can you stand out?
Sure. We talked about confidence and, believing in yourself and sort of having more eyeballs on you, experiencing that you're on not just paper but on television or on the radio, whatever it may be, and then interning. How did you deal with it now that you were a professional and you had people you had no idea who they were viewing your work and giving their opinions on your stuff? Was it easy for you to deal with at first, or was it a learning process?
Yeah. You know, I've been asked this a few times. I had the opportunity to speak to a journalism class, sports journalism class at the University of Oregon, and the professor is kind of just like an open forum Q&A thing. And the professor asked me, he's like, okay, like, can you share your experiences as like a woman in sports media? Because, you know, it's not always fantastic for people. And I said to him, I was like, you know, I'm so fortunate that, yeah, there's been like negative experiences where people say something, but I kind of just brush it off. But I've been really fortunate that I've been surrounded by really positive and empowering people at Rhode Island, in Eugene. And I feel that way now here in North Carolina, where, you know, people are respectful. They're listening to me. And granted, I've only been here for a short period of time, but when it comes to, I guess, people viewing your work, you're not going to make everybody
Yeah,
happy. You know, there's a part of our job where obviously we're delivering the facts. We are, you know, reporting on things. We are finding out information and telling it to the greater public. But then there's a portion of our job, you know, where you're allowed to give your opinions. And that's where it can get a little dicey.
sure.
But I mean, like I said, you can't make everybody happy. And I think my biggest thing is I just want to shine a light on things that don't get attention. I always tell people, it's like, my goal when I am at a game and I'm live, or if I'm telling a story, is number one, I want to make people feel like they are at the game with me. So, you know, especially said when I was first there, it's like, what are things I can bring that I see in the environment or things I saw on the field to make people feel like they're at the game, they're at the venue, they're sitting courtside with me. And then on the other flip side, I want to try and give people someone to root for. You know,
Sure.
there's so many, especially in the college landscape, there are so many student athletes who have overcome tremendous adversity. And being a student athlete now, being in college now, in what year is it, 2020, like,
Yeah.
is not easy. There's so many things happening in our world, and people now more than ever realize that, like, sports are so much bigger than,
Sure.
you know, a ball in the net, or, you know, a puck going somewhere on the ice. So
Sure.
I just try to, you know, bring a positive light to it. And when people have criticism for me, I take it,
Sure.
because I'm young, I'm new, but also I just want to grow and get better. And
Sure.
to a certain extent, you can only grow if you mess up.
Sure.
If you make a mistake, if you take a challenge, if you take a risk, type of thing. So, like I said, it all kind of goes back to the mindset thing.
Sure.
And not to be like a broken record, be like da 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 da, or
Yeah.
like sound like an old person, but it's just like, if you work hard, if you challenge yourself, if you push yourself, I believe so much will come. And I even just think about it, like on Friday, I was at a high school football game, and technical error, whatever. And I pretty much had to talk on TV for a minute. And after, I was like, I wouldn't have been able to do that a year ago. You know, so I think that's just like
Yeah.
celebrating the small victories and just realizing that this is a long process.
Yes. you went from URI to an interning to then going to Eugene, and you learned how to transition to that atmosphere, covering that level of sports. Now that you're transitioned to another market that's even bigger, has it been easier seeing as you had experience transitioning into something?
I don't know if I'd say it's easier, but I know what's expected of
Sure.
me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because starting over again is scary. It was one of those things that when I was leaving Eugene, I know some people don't love their first market and they don't have, a good time, or they're not happy or whatever. But like, I was upset leaving Eugene, not because um so much of my job, but like, I just had met the best people and had made such great relationships and loved the teams I covered and working with certain people. So, coming here, my first couple of weeks, I was like, okay, am I going to have that same feeling here?
Sure.
Now, it's so early on, and that is, like I said, that was a accumulation of 2 years to get to that level. But I would say I know it's expected of me as a journalist. However, I need to be better in the
Sure.
sense of there's more people watching me. There are more eyeballs on Duke and UNC and NC State and the Carolina Hurricanes. Um, this is a bigger market.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it all goes back to trusting yourself and knowing what you're talking about, but putting that work and putting in the research, making sure that you still are staying your true authentic self. So, I mean, going from, internships to real world on my own was, a big change. But that was kind of learning how things work and how to operate and how to conduct yourself. But now, I'm expected. It's like, okay,
Sure.
you work here, and I'm surrounded by a lot of people that have been in the business for a very long time. So it's expected to be great. It's expected to, know what you're talking about and know the team. So just getting a grasp of research has been probably the biggest curveball so far, because I covered just pretty much two Power Five programs in Eugene, and now I have three Power Five schools. I have the Carolina Hurricanes. We have a lot in this area. There is a phenomenal AAA baseball team, the Durham Bulls. There's a lot of sports here. So trying to just make sure I know everything is challenging, but also I got to give myself grace,
Sure.
because it's impossible to learn the history of a team, in a month.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. I know it's expected of me. Now it's like,
Sure.
okay, I got to bring it, and I got to make sure that my voice is heard in the room, but that I feel like I can belong and that I'm comfortable in this situation.
Sure. Now, when Archie Miller got to URI recently, he came to his press conference with Keeney Blue on, not Carolina Blue, not Tar Heel Blue, but
Keeney.
yes, Keeney Blue, and there was a parody, I think, Twitter account that was started about the blazer he was wearing for that press conference. So my question to you is: have you bought your Keeney Blue blazer yet for when you're covering UNC basketball?
I have not. I have a Carolina blue hat,
All right.
but I do not have any Tar Heel Carolina blue yet. I do have a pair of sneakers that are like a royal blue, like a Duke blue
Sure.
color, and I already know that I can't wear those when I step foot
Yes.
in Chapel Hill, because I'll probably just get
Sure.
annihilated.
Speaking of the Duke and UNC, both their two coach, longtime historic Hall of Fame coach, have both retired over the last few years. For you to join this market at this period of their history, where they have new people similar to yourself being new here, is what is that like for you? Not just in terms of easing into it, but also what you're able to cover so soon.
Yeah. No, I think it's kind of cool. Because I mean, people have covered these programs for years. There are like very veteran members in the media here that have been covering this team, for 30 plus years. And it's intimidating coming in being like, okay, like
Sure.
they're probably like, oh, up, another new girl's gonna come and go, yada yada yada. However, that is a new element to it, that there are like new reigns of head coaches, and there's shift in programs and cultures and how they're, I guess, operated might be the right
Yeah.
word. So like I have an opportunity, to kind of insert myself in and be like, hey, I'm new. I don't know anything about you. I have no, prior like assumptions about you. Like I just
Sure.
want to cover your team and get to know you. So I haven't had the opportunity to meet Coach John Shire yet over at Duke. Took over for Coach K. They had their season opener, but I was at Chapel Hill. Coach Davis, Hubert Davis, obviously was here last year with UNC,
Yeah.
and Coach Williams was there last night. He's at every game. So it is interesting, but like I said, it's just an opportunity for me. Like I said, I'm really big on relationships. That I mean is the core of, I feel like, being a human,
Sure.
why we function to an extent, and what we live for is, that human connection of talking to someone and getting to know someone. And I think that's so important because did UNC play horrendous last night? Okay, I shouldn't say horrendous. Did they not? Did they perform poorly? Yes. But it's like, it's a basketball game.
Yeah, sure.
It's like there's so much more to it. And yeah, the scoreboard is so important to us and the
Yeah,
X's and O's matter a lot. But I just want to be able in this new job to tell really impactful stories,
sure.
those human interest stories that we all love about someone overcoming an injury or someone who, faced a death or an illness young in their life and getting them here because just that character development that shapes people into who they are. I think that's so cool. And just it doesn't matter if you're a sports fan or not, that's
Sure.
something that everybody can resonate with and appeal to.
Now, although UNC is, or North Carolina is on the East Coast, similar to Rhode Island, the weather there is different than Rhode Island, I'm sure, during this time of the year. But when you got there, how did you handle that difference of temperature from the northwest to then the East Coast of North Carolina?
Yeah. So the Northwest is interesting. It rains like crazy,
Sure.
obviously, in the winter. Like it just rains and it's gray for 4 months straight. But then in the summer, it's just like hot, dry heat, like
Okay.
85, 90 degrees. There's no humidity. It's just like hot. So there was that. And then I come here, drove across the country with my boyfriend, and we went through all these places and saw like different temperatures and climates in a way. It was September. And we're like, oh my God, it's humid. We haven't had humidity in 2 years. And then I don't know how hot out it is today, but yesterday it was 85 degrees. I know back
Wow.
home in New England, Rhode Island was having a heat wave, but it's 85 degrees on November 7th, 8th.
Yeah.
I don't want this. I want it to be like 60, 50 degrees. I want to be wearing
Yeah.
sweaters and sweatshirts. Like I've had enough of the shorts and the t-shirts.
Sure.
I'm not tan anymore. So like I look pale and it's not good. But
Sure.
everyone told me that I love the weather here. I mean, it's been sunny, knock on wood, majority of my time here.
Yeah.
So I mean, weather's weather.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
It's,
I'm sure, I don't know if it's as bad as now that's getting dark here in Rhode Island at 6 o'clock
yeah,
and it's kind of disgusting. But hey, we're still getting rain here. The grass is looking green all the way into November. So what
yeah,
can you do? Before we
right.
go here, and I
The
want to,
biggest, I will say, the biggest adjustment though has been living so far from the ocean.
sure.
Because back home in my hometown of Weymouth, my town's on the water. I live like
Okay.
6, 7 minutes. I don't know, drive to the beach,
Sure.
whatever. Then I go to Rhode Island. I'm living in Narragansett. I live 2 blocks away. I'm walking to the beach every night for sunset, hanging out with my friends, not going to class, no one going to the beach, all that. Then I moved to Oregon and it's like an hour drive. And I
Oh.
thought that was an eternity. And now in the Raleigh area, I believe I'm like, I think 2 hours. And I haven't been to the beach yet, but I have ocean withdrawals.
Sure.
I will
Well,
say that.
well, hey, even people from Providence and some sure other places in Rhode Island travel on the Ripta bus to get to Narragansett Beach. So I'm sure at some point you will. Before we end here today, and again, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I want to end on a little segment called the One Word Challenge. So what this segment entails is I'll throw out a few names of people, places, or things that have some connection to my guest. This week being Miss Kate, and just do her best to say a word or two or a sentence that best comes to mind when she hears it. So if you're ready, I'm ready to start.
Oh gosh. Okay.
First one, Weymouth, Mass.
Wildcats.
Kingston, RI.
Rhodey.
The Ryan Center.
Basketball.
The Matthew Knight Arena.
Ducks.
Success.
Patience.
Hard work.
Confidence.
Stone Freeman.
Goat.
And last, showing never released in this cosmic universe we all live in called Earth. Kate Rogerson.
Getting there.
I think we can all share that sentiment. Well, I'd like to say again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this as you're adjusting to new life down North Carolina. This was a true treat for me.
Thanks, Nolan. I appreciate it. I love talking roadie anytime I
Of
can.
course. Well, all those out there who enjoy it, because who wouldn't down the line when Kate wins her first Emmy in the UNC area, you're gonna say, "Holy shit!" I subscribe, follow, comment, share all that fun jazz. So one day you look back and say, "Wow, Kate was on the podcast when they had 62 subscribers. Now it's got 100 million subscribers, like Joe Rogan or Mr. Beast." Follow on Instagram, Nolan Cart Night Show, and Twitter, Nolan Cart Night. Kate, is there anything that you like to share or have people look out for with your work?
You can follow me on Twitter if you want. I'm at Kate Rogerson TV. I tweet pictures, videos, usually complain about the Patriots, and I talk about Costco because I love Costco.
I've never been to Costco. Someone in my family said they were going to go once, but that's not a thing here around. Anyways, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, in the words of Johnny Carson, the DM talk show such as this, although not nearly as good as mine, I bid you a heartfelt good night. Till next time, take care.